Dallas has their new head coach in place, but now Brian Schottenheimer is working to fill out his staff. And while the first-year head coach is planning to call plays for the offense, it'll be interesting to see who he brings in at offensive coordinator. Jeremy Fowler reported this week that the Cowboys are considering an interview with Ken Dorsey for that position. Of course, Dorsey was the OC in Cleveland last year. Year before that, he was in Buffalo. Mina, if Schottenheimer is going to call the plays, we know that at least that'll be handled. With the OC, it's maybe a different role. What do we know, though, about Schottenheimer and what he may do if he's a play caller?
So we don't know a lot about Brian Schottenheimer. I'll start there because he is going to be calling plays. This is going to be his offense. But when people have asked me, what is that offense going to be like, I actually have said, this is an open question. He has not called plays last couple of years. It's been Mike McCarthy. And then when you go back to the last time he did in Seattle, 2020, you guys remember, Russell Wilson was lighting the NFL on fire. And then defenses started playing those too high shells. They couldn't really run the football. Russell turned it over. And then Pete Carroll, the head coach, I believe, who cares a lot about turning the ball over, said, no, we're not doing this anymore. We're running the ball. There was a bit of a push-pull between him, the coach, the quarterback. So as a result, I'm not sure what his identity right now is. And it was really interesting to me in the press conference to hear him talk about some of sort of the modern buzzwords around offense right now in terms of motion and cut splits and all of that, because that might be the direction he has envisioned, and I just don't know what that direction is.
If I was a player in their locker room, I would be very discouraged right now. I really would. Just with the way this offseason has gone, the way last offseason went, the way they handled the situation with Mike McCarthy, hiring Brian Schottenheimer, and now the who's going to be the defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator. My question, I guess the most important one on my mind is what star asks out? And I know that doesn't happen in Dallas. I know that. But, like, what star looks at this situation? Which one of their 5, 6, 7 best players looks at this situation and truly feels like we got a real chance? I just don't. I think who asks out first is going to be the most interesting part for their offseason.
All right, we're going to cut this short for a second because we do have some news. The Jets have an agreement with Tanner Engstrand to be their offense. Sources confirming. You see this tweet from Rich Cimini. What do you think, Dan?
I do not know who Tanner Engstrand is. Where does he come from? He comes from Detroit.
He comes from Detroit. Yeah. Glenn has a familiarity with him, of course. And the potential risk, as you see in the tweet here, he's never called plays on the NFL level. So another rookie OC.
I mean, I love the fact that he obviously has the history with Ben Johnson, but not having called plays before and how much this might impact Aaron Rodgers going there or not going there, I do think is probably the most interesting thing attached to it.
I think. Go ahead. Go ahead, Austin.
It's a weird hire to me, and it's a hire of comfort. I thought Aaron Glenn did a great job in going out and getting Steve Wilks and adding some experience to that staff. I think when Sean McVay took over the Rams, he had Wade Phillips on that side of the football, so you had some of that head coaching pedigree. Aaron Glenn, who I believe won't be involved heavily schematically offensively, I would love a guy who's been there before, who sort of understands what we're going to need to play that complementary football. Exactly. To win. And so I would have liked to have a more experienced guy, Laura. I'm sorry.
I'm just doing some active Googling here as we're looking up Tanner Engstrand.
For 4 years, is that what you have?
Yeah, and he was the passing game coordinator. So their pass game, was great. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. Go ahead.
I just think philosophically he can't deviate that far away from Ben Johnson. But it brings me to something that Dan has said in the past. Like, calling plays is not just looking at a sheet. And it's a feel, it's a timing situation, and that's something that we laud a lot of these really good offensive coordinators about, is calling the right plays at the right time and having a feel for how the game is going. That's always interesting to me.
Dan, what I find interesting, if it is Aaron Rodgers, which is the question hanging over everything, what Aaron Rodgers likes to do on offense is diametrically opposed from that under center play action Lions scheme. So this could be like tea leaves that maybe they do not expect the quarterback to come back.
I was just going to say, this makes me think 0% chance Aaron Rodgers is in New York. I mean, because I think that would be really risky as an organization with the new head coach to go, hey, we're going to take one of the most successful quarterbacks in the history of the league and pair him with a guy who likes to do it one way, and pair him with a guy who's never called plays before in the NFL. He's only been in the NFL for 4 years.
That's really different.
The other piece of it, too, is understanding Aaron Rodgers is not going to be around for a very long time. And if you're making decisions.
He's going to be alive.
Yeah, alive. But I'm talking about in the league. But if you're making decisions based on what would make him happy right now, you aren't making decisions that allow you to have longevity at the head coaching position.
And you remember I said, that's the first thing I would do if I was Aaron Glenn.
You would hire a coach what?
I move away from Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Because you can't, literally you living under the umbrella of the old that was already there, regardless of you being named the head coach.
At least
suggests.
Correct.
So then who would be an answer at quarterback in
I
New
think
York?
that's the next. I mean, I highly doubt that it's Sam Darnold. What happens with Geno Smith in Seattle, Derek Carr, Matthew Stafford. But it seems like if he comes back, he's going to go back to L.A. The draft obviously becomes a little bit of a forefront for New York.
Great question. Obviously, you do it all the time, but you got a lot of organizations right now that should be very honest about this. Going to take a minute.
Yeah.
And they should be very honest about their head coaches, to their fan base. There's I hear this conversation and this dialogue going, and it's our job to figure it out about these quarterbacks. It ain't none.
Right.
It ain't none.
It ain't enough of them.
That's sure. Yeah. So it's like at some point these things will work themselves out, but don't have the expectation that you're about to be like. Let us be shocked that you're a playoff contender at some point. But right now you can't. Yeah, you can't call a name and say, oh yeah, that's a great fit. That's why they got jobs already.
Right.
Yeah. Again, Tanner Engstrand will be the new offensive coordinator in New York. He comes from the Lions. We're back.
Sorry.
It's all right though. I mean,
what do you think Marcus was complaining about though?
Tweet us.
Someone not running the ball.
We're going to do a Super Bowl edition. I give you the stat. You tell me if the trend continues next week. Jalen Hurts has been impressive versus the blitz this season. He has the second highest QBR while having the third lowest off-target percentage. He's also thrown 11 touchdowns to just 1 interception. The Chiefs held Josh Allen to just 42 pass yards when sending the blitz last week. Mina, can Hurts continue to thrive when blitzed against Kansas City?
This is going to be a key question determining the game, and I think he is going to put up worse numbers than the ones he has over the course of the season because there are different types of blitzes, and Hurts has been very good against man blitzes, less so against zone pressures, which the Chiefs excel in. In fact, when Steve Spagnuolo calls zone blitzes, they get the highest pressure rate in the entire NFL. That is something to be concerned about and something the Eagles have to address ahead of the Super Bowl.
Yeah. The Eagles' pass rush has been ruthless this postseason. Each of the top 3 leaders in pass rush wins this postseason are on the Eagles, with Milton Williams leading the way. Josh Sweat is tied for 4th. Nolan Smith Jr., we've talked about how great he's been. He leads the NFL in sacks with 4. Marcus, does the trend continue on the biggest stage?
It's got to continue, and something that I'm hoping to put together for the Super Bowl. There's a trend that's been happening in these Super Bowl runs with teams. Dominant 3 techniques. And you can, even the team that squeaked in there in L.A. with Aaron Donald, you think about the plays that they have to make in critical moments. Chris Jones has been highlighted because they've been in every damn Super Bowl, feel like, for the last 10 years. But ultimately, Jalen Carter is going to have to be Jalen Carter. And that's the thing that I hope his coaches get across to him. You don't need to do anything extra. This is the Super Bowl. You're going to be hyped. You're going to be excited. The way you've been playing all season long is good enough to help us try to capture a Super Bowl.
Patrick Mahomes has 172 rush yards in his Super Bowl career, the most all-time by a quarterback. 158 of those yards came when he was scrambling. In last year's game, he had 66 rush yards, the second most by a quarterback in a Super Bowl, only behind Jalen Hurts' 70 yards in Super Bowl 57. Dan, does Mahomes continue to use his legs in this year's Super Bowl?
100%. The thing is, it's just a little different right now with Patrick Mahomes. So often we think about it in those high leverage plays, those 3rd and 4th downs, the back-breaking moments. It's actually been a little bit reversed in that AFC Championship game. Early downs, he was trying to use his legs to allow that offense to be efficient, defenders turning their backs and running away. I would fully expect against this zone match defense that Philadelphia plays and how dominant they are defensively, that on early downs, to allow the efficiency of their offense to stay ahead of the chains and not allow guys like Carter to get in those pass rush situations, Patrick will be aggressive with his legs.
The Eagles' secondary has been elite this season. Philly is allowing just 6.1 yards per attempt to opposing quarterbacks, the fewest in the NFL and their fewest allowed since 2001. They also have the most batted passes in the NFL, ranked 3rd in interceptions and completion percentage allowed. RC, will Philly's secondary continue to have success versus Mahomes?
I think they'll have success, but it's about having success in the critical football moments. I mean, there are teams that can make it difficult for the Kansas City Chiefs to shine or score throughout the game, but what are you going to do in 2 minutes? What are you going to do coming out of halftime? And more importantly, what are you going to do in the fourth quarter? Third down will be huge for this team. We've watched them keep the top on the defense the entire year, but when Patrick Mahomes scrambles and uses his legs, will they be able to plaster in the right way during a scramble drill?
It's just such a fascinating matchup in so many different ways. We're getting close to the game, but we'll dive in.
Well, folks, the Dallas Cowboys just made a big-time move, shaking things up on the offensive side of the ball. They've gone and hired Klayton Adams, who's been running the Arizona Cardinals offensive line, as their new offensive coordinator. Now, don't go thinking he's going to be the one calling the plays. No, sir. That job still belongs to Brian Schottenheimer, who's sticking to the same approach Mike McCarthy had the past couple of seasons. But make no mistake, Adams is here for one reason: to get that run game moving like a well-oiled machine. With this hire, Schottenheimer's coaching crew is all set. And guess who's back in town? Matt Eberflus. Yeah, that same guy who had a short-lived stint as the Bears' head coach is coming home to Dallas as the defensive coordinator. If that name sounds familiar, it's because this ain't his first rodeo with the Cowboys. And to round it all out, Nick Sorensen is stepping in to take charge of special teams. Now, Adams ain't new to the grind. Before his 2 seasons with Arizona, he spent 4 years with the Colts, working up close with the O-line. And before that, he put in a solid 14 years coaching in college ball, cutting his teeth at places like Boise State, where he played center back in the day, and Colorado before leaping into the NFL. The guy knows the trenches, and if he can get that offensive line humming, the Cowboys' running attack might just become a real problem for defenses across the NFL. But here's the real question. Will Adams be the missing piece that gets the Cowboys back to dominating on the ground? Or is this just another coaching change that won't move the needle? Let me hear what y'all think.